Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that, extracts the essential knowledge from your source material, giving you the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed. And today, we are immersing ourselves in the paradox of the fast casual king, Chipotle Mexican Grill. We're talking about the mission burritos, the made-to-order bowls, and this incredible, almost paralyzing tension at the core of their entire business model.
We have a really fascinating set of sources today for anyone who wants to go far beyond just the menu. We are diving into a brand that basically became synonymous with fast casual.
Right.
That's that crucial segment that promises high-quality ingredients, customized orders, and speed. It sits right in that gap between, traditional fast food and a polished sit-down restaurant. And Chipotle, founded way back on July 13, 1993, was really one of the first chains to truly master that identity.
So our mission today is to dissect the incredible corporate and logistical struggles that come up when a company founded on this principle of food with integrity.
A huge part of their brand.
Huge. Sourcing fresh, whole, often ethically raised ingredients. Tries to expand over 4,000 global locations with a target of 7,000. I mean, how do you scale that artisan quality into a massive industrial operation? We're going to track the corporate battles, the massive food safety crises, and the radical, almost futuristic solutions like robotics that they're now using to solve these systemic problems.
It's a really compelling case study in whether an idealistic concept can even survive that kind of hypergrowth. And before we really begin our journey into that first Denver kitchen, let's start with the name itself, Chipotle. It comes from the Nahuatl word Chilpotle.
Chipotle.
Yeah, and it describes a smoked and dried jalapeno chili pepper. That name itself kind of anchors the brand to a sense of tradition and culinary authenticity. And that's a concept that the company has repeatedly fought, and sometimes, very unsuccessfully, to protect against the demands of high finance and scalability.
The origin story is just so essential here because it explains why all the conflicts later on became so acute. The founder, Steve Ells, he wasn't a business school grad focused on, operational efficiency. He was a serious chef.
Absolutely. He trained at the prestigious Culinary Institute of America, and then he went on to work as a line cook at Star's, which was this famous San Francisco restaurant run by Jeremiah Tower.
And it was during his time there in the Bay Area observing the sheer democratic popularity of the local taquerias in the Mission District.
Right, that speed, the customizability.
That's when he realized he could apply kind of fine dining approach to fast food.
He took that whole San Francisco sensibility, fresh ingredients, simple preparation, you see them assemble it right in front of you, and he brought it back to his home state, to Colorado. The very first Chipotle opened near the University of Denver campus, right in a former Dolly Madison ice cream store.
And his initial financial ambition was, looking back, it was unbelievably small compared to what Chipotle became.
It really was. Ells secured an $85,000 loan from his father to get started. That was the seed money.
$85,000. And based on their, very conservative projections, they calculated a break-even point. They figured they needed to sell 107 burritos daily just to be profitable, just to cover overhead and pay back that loan.
107 burritos a day, that was the benchmark. That was success.
It's almost quaint.
It is. But the market response was immediate and just overwhelming. They didn't just meet that goal, they completely obliterated it. Within 1 month, they weren't selling 107. They were selling well over 1,000 burritos every single day.
Wow.
That efficiency of the assembly line combined with the quality of the ingredients just created this runaway success.
And that initial explosive success completely derailed Alls's original plan.
It absolutely did. His initial ambition, the chef's dream, was to use the money from the burrito shop to fund his true goal, opening a high-end fine dining restaurant. But the sheer volume and the profitability of Chipotle forced him to abandon that culinary dream and focus entirely on scaling the fast casual concept. That early cash flow funded the second store, and then a small business administration loan, an SBA loan, funded the third. They'd proven the concept was viable, but they were still just a small, regional Colorado chain.
And that's where the story takes this huge, gigantic turn. That initial organic growth was quickly eclipsed by the massive, almost unbelievable catalytic role played by McDonald's Corporation. This is really where the core tension of the brand begins.
It really is.
McDonald's, the inventor of operational efficiency and standardization, investing in a company that's dedicated to customization and fresh prep.
The McDonald's intervention was, without a doubt, the single most important event in Chipotle's history when it comes to scale. McDonald's made a minority investment in 1998. At that point, you have to remember, Chipotle only had 16 locations. All of them are concentrated in Colorado.
Just 16.
And that investment instantly converted Chipotle from a regional specialty into a serious national growth prospect.
And the Golden Arches weren't shy about doubling down on their bet either. By 2001, McDonald's had become Chipotle's largest single investor.
And this is where the acceleration and scale just becomes staggering. McDonald's capital funded this breakneck expansion. In just 7 years, the chain went from 16 locations in 1998 to over 500 by the end of 2005.
That's incredible growth.
You simply cannot achieve that kind of growth in food service without the infrastructure, the capital, and the real estate knowledge that a giant like McDonald's brings to the table. They literally laid the national foundation that Chipotle still relies on today.
And yet, the ultimate irony came in 2006. After all that, McDonald's decided to fully divest.
Yeah, this was a strategic decision by McDonald's to refocus entirely on their core worldwide hamburger business. It wasn't just Chipotle. They also divested other non-core ventures, including Donato's Pizza and Boston Market.
But the financial return on that investment is just mind-boggling.
It's staggering. McDonald's invested roughly $360 million into Chipotle over those years. When they fully divested in October 2006, they pulled out $1.5 billion.
That is an astronomical return on investment. It's got to be one of the most successful side investments in the history of the food industry.
It absolutely is. But here's the key insight we miss if we just look at the money. McDonald's proved the commercial viability of the model, that people would pay a premium for fresh customization. But Ells, the purist, he failed to learn McDonald's core lesson, which is that operational consistency is absolutely non-negotiable at scale.
That's a great point.
So Ells bought time to protect his integrity. McDonald's reaped the profits and moved on, probably knowing that the problems of scaling Ells' model were, inevitable.
And the sources confirm that even while he was under the financial umbrella of McDonald's, Ells actively resisted operational changes that the fast food giant was trying to push.
This is the first real flashpoint of that integrity conflict. McDonald's executives, focused on volume and efficiency, wanted Ells to implement their standard operational playbooks.
Like what?
Things like adding drive-through windows, expanding the menu to include breakfast items, standard fast food stuff. But Ells refused. He protected that core identity, that food was prepared fresh, often by hand, right inside of the customer.
So his resistance meant the Food with Integrity brand survived that hypergrowth phase.
It did. But it also meant the operational infrastructure remained fundamentally slow and decentralized, which basically sowed the seeds for all the future crises.
So with McDonald's gone, the market validated Ells' vision almost immediately. The initial public offering, the IPO, happened in January 2006, right at that 500-store milestone. And the investor demand was so intense, the stock price had to be increased twice before the offering even began.
The IPO was a thunderous success. On its first day as a public company, the stock soared exactly 100%.
Doubled on day one.
Doubled. At the time, that was the best U.S.-based IPO in 6 years, and the second best restaurant IPO ever, only slightly behind the launch of Boston Market, which, coincidentally, was also a former McDonald's holding.
So it's clear investors were betting that the integrity premium was sustainable.
They absolutely were. So by 2008, the company felt confident enough to take its first steps outside the U.S. They opened their first international location in Toronto, Canada. They had proven the model was scalable and immensely profitable, at least within the North American continent.
But the next era, as we'll see, would test the limits of that model completely.
This next decade is really defined by operational strain, executive turnover, and this slow, painful realization that the founders' original formula was incredibly difficult to manage, particularly when external factors like the food safety crises started to test the company's internal stability.
You can see that internal pressure building just by looking at the executive structure.
Wow.
In 2009, Monty Moran, who'd been the president and COO, was elevated to co-CEO, sharing the top job with Steve Ells.
That dual structure alone suggests that the operational demands were becoming way too complex for Ells, the culinary visionary, to manage all by himself.
And that partnership lasted until December 2016, when Moran stepped down, leaving Ells as the sole CEO.
Right, which put Ells back in complete control at the exact moment the company was facing the most devastating food safety crises in its history. But the pressure was immense, and the market was demanding a commercial solution, not a culinary one.
Ells stayed on as CEO for barely another year, announcing in November 2017 that he would step down completely. And this signaled the end of the founders' era and opened the door to the most polarizing strategic decision the company could have possibly made: Who would replace him?
In February 2018, Brian Niccol was named CEO. And Niccol was the former chief executive of Taco Bell.
Taco Bell?
Yeah. For the brand purists, this was an almost sacrilegious choice. Niccol was famous for efficiency, aggressive marketing, and, frankly, highly processed ingredients.
I have to push back on this a little. If the brand is built entirely on integrity and freshness, wasn't hiring a CEO famous for high volume and cost control at a direct competitor a tacit admission that the integrity promise was failing, or at least that it was unsustainable?
That is precisely the analytical tension that Niccol's hiring represents. Analysts were deeply divided. The critics saw it as a total betrayal, a shift from quality to pure commercialism. But the proponents argued that Chipotle didn't need a better chef. It needed a better manager of logistics and crisis. It needed someone who understood how to streamline operations and standardize processes.
The lessons Ells had refused to learn from McDonald's.
Exactly. And how did the market react to this ideological conflict?
Well, the stock market voted overwhelmingly in favor of the commercial new blood. The stock jumped over 12% immediately following Niccol's appointment.
Investors clearly prioritized operational stability and commercial aggression over the founder's frequently messy idealism. Niccol's mandate was clear. Fix the operations, increase digital sales, and scale faster.
And the Ells era officially concluded when he resigned as chairman and departed the board in March 2020. Even before that, in May 2018, the corporate headquarters where the company had been based for 25 years relocated from Denver to Newport Beach, California.
A move that affected around 400 corporate workers. And you're right, this was more than just a relocation. It was a physical severing of ties to the founder's roots.
So looking at the financial picture, Niccol's appointment seems to have accelerated the company's trajectory as a corporate growth machine, despite all the lingering operational challenges.
Oh, the growth in scale is undeniable. Locations grew from 956 in 2009 to a staggering 3,726 by 2024.
And the revenue.
Revenue jumped from $1.518 billion in 2009 to $11.314 billion in 2024. That is just explosive growth sustained over 2 decades.
But those impressive revenue figures, they kind of mask some profound internal conflicts about corporate ethics and wealth distribution, especially during the later Ells tenure. We really need to highlight the CEO-to-worker pay ratio that was reported back in 2015.
That ratio is a stark illustration of how difficult it was for the company to maintain that high-minded integrity brand internally. In 2014, Steve Ells earned approximately $29 million.
$29 million.
And the median worker pay at Chipotle that same year was reported by Glassdoor as $19,000.
So what's the ratio on that?
That resulted in a pay ratio of 15.22 to 1.
Wow. But didn't the company defend that? I mean, arguing that Ells's vision and performance driving that incredible growth and the record IPO justified that massive compensation.
They certainly did. They argued it was performance-based compensation aligned with shareholder value. However, the optics were just terrible. How can you be the champion of ethical sourcing and the goodness of your food when your entry-level employees are paid substantially less than minimum living standards and the wealth disparity is so extreme?
Yeah.
This tension between the public-facing integrity and the internal corporate behavior has always been a fault line in the company's story.
And despite the massive overall growth, even powerhouses are vulnerable to market shifts. The sources show a dip just recently.
That's right. Following the fiscal Q2 2025 results, the share price fell 9% after same-store sales actually shrank 4%.
Which suggests that the quest for growth is hitting points of saturation or maybe consumer resistance.
Which brings us to this strategic pivot. When sales start shrinking, the answer is usually operational efficiency. And here's where it gets really interesting. Under Niccol's direction, operational modernization is now the top priority, driven by technology.
A complete philosophical break from the founder's resistance to standardization and automation.
A total break. The first major step was changing the physical store format to enhance digital sales.
The Chipotle.
Correct. In May 2018, they introduced the Chipotlane. And it's important to remember, this is not a traditional drive-through window.
Right, you can't just pull up an order.
No, it is exclusively for mobile order pickup. This setup completely streamlines the process, removing the variability of the cashier-customer interaction and reserving the lane purely for speed. This innovation has been massively successful in increasing throughput and digital sales, which are crucial for their profitability. As of 2023, there were over 500 locations with Chipotlanes.
And the continued push toward efficiency, which was probably exacerbated by post-pandemic labor shortages, has led them directly to robotics, a move that sounds completely counterintuitive for a brand built on hand-prepared food.
It's the ultimate collision between the founder's ethos and modern industrial reality. In July 2023, the company announced they were testing a robot specifically designed for a massive bottleneck in their fresh prep model, preparing avocados for guacamole.
I can imagine that's a huge time sink.
Huge. And then in September 2024, they escalated that effort, announcing a collaboration with a company called Vibu on a specialized machine named Avocado.
The avocado is genuinely fascinating.
It is the poster child for solving this integrity at scale problem. Avocado is an automated machine that they claim can peel, core, and cut avocados in less than 30 seconds for large batches.
Think about the implications of that.
Right. A human prepping avocados introduces massive variability. How many you yield per case, how fast they are cut, the risk of cross-contamination if the surface isn't cleaned. The avocado drastically reduces labor cost, increases yield consistency, and critically reduces that human point of failure, which, as we'll discuss later, has been their single biggest problem.
So the avocado isn't just about saving money on labor. It's a direct response to the food safety and the portion inconsistency issues that plagued the last decade.
Precisely. It turns a vulnerable, highly manual process into a standardized, machine-driven one. And the automation isn't stopping in the kitchen. No.
Wow.
In August 2025, in a massive technological bet on the future of delivery, Chipotle partnered with Zipline to test drone aircraft food delivery in the greater Dallas area.
Drones.
These are huge technological gambits aimed at solving speed, labor, and consistency issues all at once. They are building a McDonald's-style infrastructure using 21st century technology, something Ells would never have even considered.
But before this technological future arrived, Ells spent years trying to scale his original integrity concept into other cuisines. And this led to the empire that wasn't. A string of really spectacular failed spin-offs.
Yes, 5 major attempts to diversify the menu using the same operational DNA, and all of them failed. It really demonstrates how unique and non-transferable the success of the Mission Burrito format truly was.
What was the first one?
The first was Soul Daddy in 2011, a soul food concept. It operated for only 8 weeks across 3 locations before being closed.
8 weeks? That's a staggering corporate failure rate. That's not even a test run.
The failure was so immediate that it just indicated a total mismatch between the concept and the market, despite all the Chipotle corporate backing.
Then came the most ambitious attempt, right? ShopHouse.
Yes, ShopHouse Southeast Asian Kitchen launched in 2011. This followed the exact Chipotle service format, customized assembly line construction, and it adhered to the food with integrity ethos.
So what happened?
It lasted 6 years, opened 15 locations, but the cost, the complexity, and a lack of differentiation meant that all 15 locations were closed by March 2017.
They even tried to go head-to-head with the classic American fast food template. Burgers.
They did. Tasty Made was their focused burger concepts launched in 2016, offering a simple menu of burgers, fries, and shakes.
And how did that go?
They clearly hope to capture the market that loves a simple, quality burger, much like the successful regional chains. But after opening a lone location in Ohio, it closed in February 2018. They exited the burger space completely.
And then there was the attempt to enter the highly competitive pizza market with Pizzeria Locale starting in 2013.
This was a fast casual pizza chain partnership. The idea was compelling. Customized, fast-fired pizzas made to order. But the pizza industry is just cutthroat and very low margin. By July 2023, Chipotle had completely exited the pizza market, closing all remaining locations. The failure was so complete that the owners of the original full-service Pizzeria Locale, which predated the partnership, actually renamed their restaurant to Pizzeria Alberico to distance themselves from the corporate failure.
And the pattern continued even under the new management, which shows how hard it is to launch anything outside that burrito silo.
Yeah, Mesa Fresh Eatery, a California-inspired bowls concept, was tested in 2023 but abandoned a year later in April 2024.
So what's the big lesson here?
The lesson is profound. The build-your-own operational template is easily copied, but the synergy between speed, the perception of health, and the unique, simple flavor profile of the original Chipotle ingredients is almost non-transferable. The company's success remains inextricably linked to one single dominant Mission Burrito product line.
All right, now let's pivot to global growth. For a company that operates in the thousands domestically, its international expansion was famously slow and cautious for many, many years.
Historically, yes, the international footprint was tiny compared to its U.S. presence. By October 2014, which was 6 years after launching their first location in Toronto, they only had 17 locations outside the United States.
Just 17. Why so slow?
Well, they faced significant cultural hurdles. Reviewers often noted that in Europe, the food was seen as overpriced. And in the UK specifically, there was an unfamiliarity with Mexican food, even as local competitors specializing in burritos were opening up at the same time.
So where were they able to establish those early, slow footholds?
Canada was the starting point, back in 2008 in Toronto. That market proved to be pretty steady, growing to 60 stores by September 2025 across Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta.
And they're using Canada as a test market, right?
They are. They're using it as a testing ground for innovations like the Chipotlane, which was introduced in Port Coquitlam. It demonstrates that global focus on efficiency.
And Europe started just a couple of years later.
Yeah, European expansion began in London in May 2010. Then France followed in Paris in May 2012, and Germany in Frankfurt in 2013. And interestingly, in Paris, they built a massive flagship store. The La Défense location, opened in 2014, was the largest Chipotle in the world at the time.
How big?
It was over 7,000 square feet, which far exceeds the typical 2,200 to 2,500 square feet of a standard location.
That desire for a huge flagship indicates a belief in the market potential. But the reality is that the European footprint remains pretty modest.
Very modest. As of September 2025, the number of European stores is still small, 20 in the UK, 6 in France, and only 2 in Germany.
So you contrast this with their goal of doubling their overall footprint to 7,000 locations.
Yeah.
The old company-owned slow roll strategy just couldn't get them there.
Not a chance. Which leads us to the monumental strategic shift under the new leadership, embracing franchising. For decades, Chipotle was defined by the fact that all U.S. stores were company-owned, ensuring maximum control over quality and sourcing. Now, that is completely out the window for international growth.
This is perhaps the most significant strategic pivot and another direct break from the founder's ethos, which prized control over speed.
Absolutely. Nicole realized that scaling to 7,000 locations required local knowledge and decentralized capital. So in July 2023, they signed their first ever franchise deal with the Kuwait-based Al Shaya Group to tackle the Middle East.
And this franchise model has yielded incredibly rapid results compared to that slow 6-year European rollout.
The difference is night and day. The first franchise location opened in Kuwait in April 2024. They followed quickly, opening the UAE debut in Dubai in September 2024, and then a third UAE location in Abu Dhabi by August 2025. Qatar followed in September 2025.
So that rapid, successful deployment in markets where they have no existing brand recognition proves the value of local expertise in franchise capital.
It does, and that franchising effort is now rapidly spreading across the globe.
Where to next?
In April 2025, they signed a joint venture with Alsi, a major player in Latin America, to open restaurants in Mexico by early 2026. And that has huge potential for expansion across Central and South America.
And Asia.
Most recently, September 2025, they announced a joint venture with SPC Group to break into Eastern Asia, targeting South Korea and Singapore in 2026.
So this shift from painstakingly slow, company-owned stores to aggressive, franchise global expansion, it shows a fundamental commercial confidence in the replicability of the operational template, even if they risk losing absolute control over the integrity promise.
That's the trade-off they're making.
All right, the menu and the food philosophy. This is really the sacred ground of the company. Ells' initial vision was all about simplicity. 5 items: burritos, bowls, tacos, quesadillas, and salads, characterized as Cal-Mex cuisine.
And that simplicity was completely intentional. Ells stated back in 2007 that it's important to keep the menu focused. You can ensure that you do them better than anybody else.
Right.
The simplicity reduces complexity, which should, in theory, aid quality control and speed. It's a very chef-driven approach to menu design.
And that concept was supported by the operational setup that defined their integrity. A commitment to having no freezers, no microwave ovens, and no can openers in the restaurants. The food was supposed to be prepared fresh, in-house, daily.
That's correct. Everything is prepared freshly, with only a few exceptions. Primarily large batch items like the beans and carnitas, which are prepared at a centralized kitchen facility in Chicago and then shipped out.
So this commitment to fresh preparation, which involves intense manual labor, is radically non-standard for high-volume fast food operations.
It became their main brand differentiator, but, as we'll see, it was also their Achilles heel.
The menu has evolved slightly, mainly by introducing new protein options to keep pace with dietary trends.
Yeah, we saw the introduction of sofritas, their popular tofu-based option, which started testing in 2013 and rolled out nationwide in 2014. They also tested and then pulled a pork and chicken chorizo option in 2015-2017 and a limited return in 2018.
And more recently?
More recently, in response to health and vegan trends, they tested cauliflower rice in 2020 and a plant-based chorizo made with pea protein, which was a limited-time national item in early 2022 before being removed. These iterations show them trying to expand the menu without betraying that core simplicity.
But despite the focus on fresh and simple ingredients, the nutritional facts of the massive portions often run counter to the perception of health.
That's the major nutritional contradiction. Back in 2003, early in their growth, the Center for Science and the Public Interest released a report that highlighted a huge problem.
Which was?
A typical Chipotle burrito could easily exceed 1,000 calories, which is nearly 2 meals worth of food for many adults. MSNBCHealth.com later listed them as one of the 20 worst foods in America because of that high calorie and sodium content.
And when you compare it specifically to traditional fast food, like a Big Mac, the burrito wasn't always the healthier choice.
No, the comparison was startling. Analysts found the typical burrito contained more total fat, cholesterol, carbohydrates, and sodium than a standard Big Mac.
But what about the good stuff?
Well, it's to give credit where it's due, the burrito also packed significantly more protein and dietary fiber, thanks to the beans and vegetables. And they have made efforts to improve accessibility for different diets. For example, in late 2013, they removed bacon from their pinto beans, making them completely vegetarian and vegan-friendly.
Okay, now we arrive at the centerpiece of the brand's self-identity, food with integrity. This is the foundational promise Steve Ells built the company on, championing ethical sourcing. But it's also the source of the deepest corporate conflicts.
The commitment really started with the sourcing of meat, which was driven by Ells' personal shock. In 1999, while he was seeking ways to improve the taste of their carnitas, he visited these concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs.
CAFOs?
Yeah, where most industrial meat is raised. He described these large industrial facilities as horrific.
And we should probably define KFOs clearly for you, the listener. They are essentially highly intensive livestock facilities designed to maximize volume and speed of production. And they're often criticized for their environmental impact and animal welfare standards.
Exactly. They are the industrial-scale antithesis of ethical farming. And Ells' reaction led him to start sourcing from open-range pork suppliers instead.
And what was the business impact of that?
Well, this decision increased the cost of their pork, but ironically, it also increased the sales of the carnitas burritos, demonstrating that customers were willing to pay that premium for the integrity promise.
Ells even took this commitment into the political realm.
He did. He testified before Congress in support of the Preservation of Antibiotics for Medical Treatment Act, showing a willingness to advocate for industry-wide change regarding livestock care.
And the commitment reached its logical peak in 2015 when Chipotle stopped using genetically modified corn and soybeans.
Right. Proudly claiming to be the first nationwide restaurant chain to cook completely GMO-free food. However, as is often the case with these purity claims at scale, it led to immediate legal trouble.
A lawsuit.
In 2019, Chipotle paid a substantial $6.5 million to settle a class action lawsuit.
And what was the substance of that lawsuit? What was the claim?
The plaintiffs argued that while the food prepared in the restaurants might not contain GMO ingredients, the company's claim of being completely GMO-free was misleading because the livestock used to produce the meat and dairy products had likely consumed GMO animal feed.
So it's a supply chain issue.
It highlights the immense, almost impossible difficulty of ensuring a completely pure supply chain when you operate at this massive scale. The food might be non-GMO, but the inputs to the supply chain are often not.
And we see this integrity failure persist with animal welfare, even with established internal commitments.
The sources confirm this. In 2017, Chipotle made a public commitment to transition away from bird spread to maximize growth at the expense of their well-being, a major ethical concern in industrial chicken farming.
But did they follow through?
Well, investigations conducted by animal welfare groups in 2024 indicated that the company was failing to meet these established welfare standards. The gap between the press release commitment and the operational reality just continues to surface.
Another massive integrity battle that played out very publicly involved the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, or CIW, over tomatoes. This wasn't about animal welfare or GMOs, but about human labor conditions.
This was a 6-year public relations nightmare for the brand, lasting from 2006 to 2012. The CIW protested Chipotle, demanding that the company sign the Fair Food Agreement.
And what did that agreement entail?
It was simple. It committed Chipotle to paying a penny per pound premium on Florida tomatoes, which would be directed toward boosting the wages of the farm laborers. It also committed them to only buying from growers who complied with the Fair Food Code of Conduct.
And Ells initially resisted this agreement, framing it as an issue of control.
That was his public line. He argued the CIW wanted them to sign a contract that would allow the organization to control Chipotle's decisions regarding food in the future. But the ethical and public relations stakes were huge. Was their integrity philosophy genuine if they fought against better conditions for the laborers who harvested their ingredients?
There was significant external pressure.
Huge pressure, including an open letter of support for the CIW signed by the creators of the documentary Food, Inc.
And eventually, that public pressure proved too great to sustain the fight.
In October 2012, Chipotle relented and signed the agreement, becoming the 11th major company to join the Fair Food program. It was a significant victory for labor and a major course correction for Chipotle, forcing their labor practices to align, at least partially, with their ethical sourcing rhetoric.
Okay, finally, let's bring this conflict right down to the counter level. Portion size irregularities. This isn't about ethics or pathogens, but about operational consistency, and it has become a viral topic on social media platforms like TikTok.
This is a perfect example of how the manual fresh prep model, the one that guarantees quality, also guarantees inconsistency. Because the company refuses to use strict scoops or automation for many ingredients, it relies entirely on the individual employee's judgment and mood.
Right.
So when volume is high, there is a natural incentive to move faster, which often means skimping on portions to save time and cost.
So essentially, when I pay $15 for a bowl, whether I get a snack or enough food for 2 meals is entirely dependent on whether my server had a good morning. That's the complete antithesis of a scaled industrial operation.
And this is exactly what an independent analysis confirmed. In June 2024, a Wells Fargo analyst decided to put these customer claims to the test.
What did they do?
They ordered 75 identical items across 8 New York City locations, and then they weighed them. The variance was shocking.
What were the extremes?
The portion sizes ranged dramatically, from a measly 14 ounces to a massive 27 ounces. The median weight was 21.5 ounces.
So that scientifically validated the viral customer frustration.
It did. When you rely on employees to eyeball ingredients quickly, you introduce an unacceptable level of operational variability. It frustrates customers, it creates food waste, and it completely undermines the professionalism the brand attempts to project.
And this manual failure point is precisely why the new CEO, Nickel, is now so aggressively pursuing the avocado and other automation solutions.
It is. So the issues with consistency, they extended catastrophically into food safety. The sheer number, the variety, and the frequency of the food safety crises Chipotle endured suggest that the problem wasn't a single bad ingredient or one sick employee, but a systemic failure rooted in their decentralized, high-prep operational model.
And they faced nearly every major pathogen: hepatitis A, norovirus, E. coli, Salmonella, and Clostridium perfringens. Critics have argued that this points to a fundamental flaw in the way they handle food, not just isolated incidents.
That's right. A former professor of food safety at Kansas State University openly criticized Chipotle for essentially blurring the lines, confusing the public by equating naturally raised or organic sourcing with food safety.
Which are two totally separate concepts.
Entirely separate. In fact, Chipotle's own annual reports in 2013 and 2014 publicly acknowledged this higher risk factor. They stated, and I'm quoting here, they may be at a higher risk for foodborne illness outbreaks due to our use of fresh produce and meats rather than frozen, and our reliance on employees cooking with traditional methods rather than automation.
That is an astonishing corporate admission. They knew their foundational philosophy was a vulnerability. So let's detail the timeline of the crises, because the severity and frequency were just unprecedented for a high-profile, modern food chain.
The decade of crises started pretty early. In March and April of 2008, there was a hepatitis A outbreak in San Diego that infected 22 customers. Later that same month, a separate norovirus outbreak in Kent, Ohio, sickened over 400 people, largely Kent State students.
And what were the causes?
In both cases, the contamination was either untraceable or linked back to sick employees who should not have been working.
And the situation became truly catastrophic in 2015, which many sources referred to as the year of the outbreaks.
It was a total nightmare year for them. It started quietly with the little-known July 2015 E. coli 0157 Bort H7 outbreak in Seattle, affecting 5 people, which health officials never traced to a specific source. Then came the August 2015 norovirus outbreak in Simi Valley, California, which ultimately sickened 207 customers and employees. And this incident was pivotal because of the legal fallout.
This is the event that triggered the federal criminal investigation, correct?
Yes. The Simi Valley incident led to a federal criminal subpoena issued by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FDA in January 2016. Furthermore, a massive federal class action lawsuit was filed. The suit claimed the restaurant knowingly allowed an ill manager to work for 2 days,
2 days.
potentially handling thousands of meals, and then compounded the error by deep cleaning the facility before notifying health officials, essentially destroying forensic evidence. The total failure in managerial protocol was staggering.
And the crises continued that same month.
Yes, simultaneously in August 2015, a completely separate Salmonella Newport outbreak hit the Minnesota market, affecting 64 people across 22 different locations.
And did they find the source on that one?
Health officials traced this specific incident back to contaminated Mexican tomatoes. Then came the devastating multi-state October-November 2015 major E. coli crisis.
This is the outbreak that forced mass closures.
Right. The STEC 026 strain outbreak began in Oregon and Washington state, forcing Chipotle to proactively close 43 stores. The pathogen expanded rapidly to 11 states, infecting 55 people, with 21 requiring hospitalization.
And the source?
And here's a critical administrative detail. The source of the outbreak remained untraceable, and health authorities specifically noted that Chipotle's decentralized and poor record-keeping actively hindered their investigation into the supply chain. This absolutely hammered the share price.
And the final insult in 2015 was the December norovirus outbreak in a major college market.
In Boston, an outbreak sickened 141 people, primarily Boston college students. Health inspectors traced the cause to a sick employee, and the manager was fired for knowingly allowing the ill worker to complete their shift. This required closing the location for health violations. The speed and variety of these concurrent crises really showed the systemic problem was company-wide.
So what was the corporate response to this relentless public health disaster?
In February 2016, they undertook radical, unprecedented, and very expensive steps. Chipotle closed all 2,000-plus U.S. eateries for a few hours for a national, mandatory, all-staff food safety meeting.
And they made changes.
Big changes. They hired a new head of food safety and implemented new, stringent mandates, hand washing every half hour, and 2 employees must verify that high-risk produce like onions, jalapenos, and avocados are immersed in hot water for 5 seconds to kill surface germs.
And critically, they began implementing industrial processing to reduce risk, which directly conflicted with the founders' ethos.
This is a critical moment. They implemented something called pascalization for some ingredients. Now, for you, the listener, we should clarify what that means. Pascalization, or high-pressure processing, is an industrial technique where food is placed under extremely high pressure, up to 87,000 pounds per square inch, to kill pathogens like E. coli and Salmonella. It essentially pasteurizes the fresh ingredients without using heat.
So this is an expensive, high-tech industrial process, the exact opposite of the no can openers, no microwaves, chef-driven ideal.
Absolutely. They were outsourcing the risk of the fresh prep model. They realized they couldn't guarantee safety with 2,000 separate kitchens handling everything manually, so they began relying on industrial partners to pre-treat ingredients before they even arrived at the store.
But despite those massive, expensive changes, the systemic issues resurfaced.
They did. In July 2017, a norovirus outbreak in Virginia sickened over 130 people. Again, officials blamed lax sick policy enforcement and a sick employee. But the worst incident yet came in July 2018. A Clostridium perfringens outbreak in Powell, Ohio, affected over 700 people.
700.
Public health officials characterized it as the worst incident traced to a single restaurant location in the company's history. This was the moment that truly solidified the need for the technological solutions we discussed earlier, like avocado.
And beyond food safety, the company also suffered major data security failures, which reminds us that any modern chain is also a technology company.
Yeah, the major incident was the 2017 data breach. Their point-of-sale system, where customers swiped their cards, was compromised for 3 weeks, from late March to mid-April.
How widespread was it?
It affected 2,250 restaurants across 47 states and Canada, potentially compromising hundreds of thousands of customer credit and debit card accounts. This led to a class action lawsuit from credit unions.
And even after pushing customers toward their mobile app, security issues followed them.
In 2019, customers reported their mobile ordering accounts had been hacked, leading to fraudulent charges. Chipotle attempted to blame customers for using unsecured passwords, but many countered that the issue pointed to a server-side vulnerability, indicating that their digital security infrastructure also struggled to keep pace with their growth.
Finally, let's address the labor and legal issues that compound this internal conflict of the integrity brand. It shows operational managers cutting corners at the expense of basic employee rights.
The legal consequences have been severe. In January 2020, Massachusetts fined the company $1.3 million for a staggering 13,000 child labor violations.
13,000. That huge number indicates a systemic failure of management to follow basic labor law and scheduling regulations across multiple locations.
It does, and this strain on employees naturally led to attempts at unionization, challenging the corporate culture directly.
And how did the company respond?
We saw significant corporate pushback against union attempts. In July 2022, a store in Augusta, Maine that was attempting to unionize was closed by Chipotle, ostensibly citing staffing difficulties. The NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, later issued a complaint accusing Chipotle of illegally closing the store and blackballing those employees.
But despite the corporate resistance, we saw a landmark victory for labor.
Yes. In August 2022, a Michigan restaurant successfully voted to unionize with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. This marked the chain's first unionized location, and it really underscores the deep strain and dissatisfaction felt by workers trying to operate within that pressurized, high-prep, high-volume environment that Chipotle demands.
So the operational failures, the safety crises, the legal settlements, they all paint a picture of a company just struggling to reconcile its high-integrity promise with the reality of decentralized high-speed execution. So what does this all mean for you, the consumer, and for the future of the fast casual category? We've traced the brilliant genius of Steve Ells' initial, simple concept, fresh ingredients, customized assembly, and the massive financial lift McDonald's provided that allowed the brand to scale nationally.
But once separated from that corporate structure, the company continuously struggled to maintain operational consistency. That inability to standardize led to everything from portion sizes varying by over 13 ounces between restaurants to food safety crises that affected hundreds of people across multiple states and forced the company to adopt expensive industrial processes like pascalization.
And the current leadership, acknowledging that the founder's ethos was just too vulnerable for a publicly traded hyper-growth company, is aggressively embracing commercialism and technology. They are pushing hard toward massive automation with the avocado, testing drone delivery via Zipline, and radically shifting toward rapid global franchising with partners like the Alshaya Group.
The core conflict remains the defining characteristic of the brand. Chipotle's adherence to a decentralized, fresh prep model, the no freezers, no microwave standard, is what fueled the Food with Integrity brand and its early success. But that very structure proved critically vulnerable to inconsistency, contamination, and managerial oversight at scale. It was a structure designed for culinary perfection, but implemented by thousands of minimally paid workers, creating an operational chasm that nearly crippled the company.
So we leave you with a question that will determine the next decade of this global empire. The new goal is immensely ambitious, doubling the footprint to 7,000 locations globally, relying heavily on new international franchise partners, and domestically targeting smaller, untapped markets. Given the historic difficulties they faced in maintaining quality control and safety, even in markets where they owned and operated every single store, you have to remember the 700-person outbreak in Ohio or the major E. coli crisis with untraceable sources. How will this unprecedented scaling effort, driven by new leadership and increasing reliance on automation and franchising, impact the company's ability to uphold its original high-integrity mission? Will automation and franchising prove to be the only viable mechanism to sustain the company, even if it dilutes the very founding philosophy that made it a powerhouse in the first place? That's the tension you, the informed consumer and investor, will be watching closely in the coming years. Thank you for joining us for the Deep Dive.